The Lane Press shares their secret to improving ROI. Before we get started, I'd like to cover just a couple of quick housekeeping items. Number one, if you participate in social media, you can connect with Satori Software via Twitter, on LinkedIn, and on Facebook. The various tags and handles are included in the presentation that will be posted at the end of this webinar. If, after the completion of this webinar, you have additional questions for either Satori Software or the Lane Press, you can reach out to either company via social media. Next, this webinar is being recorded. The recording will be available shortly after the broadcast, and you can find it on the webinars page of satorisoftware.com. One more thing, there is a question box on the right-hand side of your screen. Please feel free to enter any questions that you may have as the webinar progresses. We will collect these questions and answer them at the end of the presentation during a dedicated question and answer period. Finally, this webinar is scheduled to last 60 minutes. However, in the event that we run long or collect a whole bunch of good questions, we will stay until they've all been answered. If you need to drop off because of time constraints, the webinar in its entirety will be included in the recorded version that will be posted later on satorisoftware.com. I'm Rob Perrin, the Director of Merchandising for Satori Software, and I'm going to be your host today. Joining me are Joe Bailey. Joe is the Director of Monticello Solutions and Industry Relations for Satori Software. He was one of the founding partners of Monticello Software and serves on the Mail.dat working group and the Mailing Software Developers Group of ID Alliance. In addition, he participates on several MTAC groups in conjunction with the USPS. Also joining us will be Jean Raynaire. Jean has been in the mailing industry since 2000. She demos Satori pre-sort and post-sort products, assists customers in making changes in pre-sort, and ways to revise their jobs in Monticello to save postage and make Postal One e-documentation process more efficient. Finally, our guest speaker today will be Jason Kiefer. Jason is the mailing systems specialist for the Lane Press. Jason began working for the Lane Press in 1995 after leaving the Marine Corps. He started in the pre-press part of the business and then 6 years later found himself in the distribution part of the business. Jason has been involved with the PCC Executive Board, Postal Affairs, Post Office, and pre-sort for the last 12 years. In his off hours, Jason enjoys weightlifting, golf, riding his Harley, and spending time with his wife and 2 children. The Lane Press has been using Monticello for the past 7 years or so, Jason says, and he says that they could not be happier with the software. Agenda items. Today's webinar has 3 items on the agenda. First, the interview with Jason from the Lane Press. Next, a live demonstration presented by Jean Raynaire. And finally, our question and answer period where I will read the questions you've submitted via the question box for responses from our various panelists. Okay, what do you say we get started? Good morning, Joe Bailey. How are you?
Good morning. How are you, Rob?
Very well, thank you.
Okay, Jason, welcome to you.
Hello, how are you?
Let's get started by, how about if you tell us a little bit about the Lane Press and what you folks specialize in?
Okay. The Lane Press is a family-owned publications printer. We've been in business for over 110 years. We're located up in South Burlington, Vermont. We have customers nationally. We really specialize in alumni publications. We process standard mail, periodical mail, and bound printed matter, as well as machinable parcels.
And how long have you been there?
I've been with Lane Press for 19 years.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about your responsibilities there.
Currently, I perform the data cleansing and pre-sort. I'm also the supervisor for the pre-sort team here at Lane Press. I'm the customer support for our customer service team and sales team. And I also work closely with the local post office and act as the postal affairs person for our customers.
Wow, you wear a lot of hats. So tell us about the products that you use from Satori Software.
Currently, we use Satori pre-sort, and then we have 3 Monticello products that we use for our post-sort application, which is MailDB, EntryDB, and PostageDB. All 3 worked fantastic with the pre-sort.
So what do you think are some of the unique challenges that you have in your mailing operations?
Well, like everyone out there, the biggest challenge we face is the rising postal cost and the changes to the different locations that people will go to or that we can drop stuff to. And so that's our biggest challenge. And with the production cost being around 50% of the distribution, or 50% of the distribution is the production cost of a magazine, that is something where we're always trying to look for a new avenue to try and save our customers some money. So we take each job and we try and analyze it every time to see if there's something different we can do using Monticello and EntryDB to try and find some more savings for our customer.
So is that what led you to start using post-presort software?
Yeah, I mean, I think what really led us to start using post-presort software was, you know, there was a big push for drop shipping a while back, and at that time we were using a different software called Visions, which really kind of tied our hands as far as how much we could do with the mail.dat file. And so we had to rely heavily on our dropship vendor to take care of our mail.dats, to load plan them, to optimize them, which really left us at the mercy of our vendor to take care of that and get it done in a timely fashion. So that's really what pointed us toward needing a new piece of software or a solution.
I'm guessing that some of the folks on the call are probably asking themselves, if they don't have post-presort software, they may be doing drop shipping and using presort software to assign the entry points. So why would you use post-presort software to assign entry points?
Well, doing the drop shipping and presort works okay. The only difference that we've noticed is you can't figure in the freight to get it there and then be able to tell whether or not, okay, if I'm shipping a pallet to a specific postal location, yes, they're going to save because they're going to claim the SCF discount, but what's it going to cost? Where with the post-presort software like EntryDB, you can program all that in, including markup, so that it's just one pass through one piece of software rather than trying to call around and figure out where truckers will go and what the cost of the freight will be.
Okay, and so another question I get often is, do you then have to re-presort your file?
No, that's the best part about it, is that Monticello, MailDB, and EntryDB use the actual presort to analyze it and determine whether or not there's a savings. And so it makes it so that you don't have to go back and resort it. And the nice thing about it is, too, you can, because you're uploading a mail.dat, you can use the Monticello software to finalize your postal statements without having to go back and redo anything.
And when you were looking at post-presort software, what steps did you take to identify the best solution to meet your needs?
Well, one of our previous managers actually had used Monticello and worked with it and knew what exactly it was capable of doing. So one of the steps was we took their advice and looked at the software. We also looked at what we were spending having someone else do it and how much time it was costing us as far as waiting for that person to take care of that product or to take care of that file for us to get it back to us. And so we analyzed that, and then we demoed some pieces of software. And really, we chose the one that we thought was the most reliable and the one that was the most user-friendly.
So other than doing dropship analysis, do you use the software to modify your files and do other stuff with it?
Yes, we use the software to update our postal statements, update our advertising. We use it so that if, say we've got some spoilage or shortage or something like that, we can use the Monticello to take care of that as well. So we use it for all of that process. Plus we use it to get stuff ready to go to Postal One.
And back on the entry optimization, do you use it sometimes to handle multi-job pools, or do you do it just a single job at a time?
For the most part, we do a single job at a time, but if you've got a job that you've run through multiple presorts and you've created multiple mail.dats, that's the nice thing about it, is that you can run the different presorts, but then you can optimize all of them at the same time in one pass rather than having to go back through and do each one individually.
And as far as the benefits of using the software, can you quantify how much time or money that you've been able to save by using that kind of software?
Well, it's hard to quantify how much money, time. We've saved a huge amount of time because we no longer have to send it out to someone else to do it. We can do it right in-house. If we have a customer that, they don't have enough money to do something with, we can use the software to go in and say, okay, well, you've got enough money to cover this much of the postage, and so we'll take care of this part, and we'll just hold this part back until you get the money for it. So, we have about 85% of our customers taking advantage of drop shipping, and without that software, we wouldn't be able to do that. So overall, it saved us a ton of time because we can run a job from start to finish and get it done off our desk and into the bindery so that they can run it on the machine.
And how has your experience with the customer support been?
Oh, the customer support's awesome. The tech team, I don't think I've ever waited longer than a half an hour for an answer when I have an issue. They're very knowledgeable, and they're very good at getting back to you when you have a problem. And say you have something where you think if you've got an idea of how it could work better, you can always bounce those ideas off the tech team to see if that's possible.
Terrific. And I think there are probably some listeners on the call today who think of themselves as being more of medium to small volume mailers. Can you tell folks like that how they might be able to cost justify post-presort software?
Well, with the push for full service IMB, having a post-presort solution like MailDB, I find it to be essential. It makes preparing and managing the mail.dats much easier because you can pre-validate stuff before you upload it, make sure that it's going to pass on Postal One. Personally, we wouldn't be full service right now without Monticello and the assistance that we got from Monticello to be able to do that, because we would have to manage our mail.dats in a text editor, which is very time consuming and very easy to make mistakes in. At one point actually we were looking at possibly they were looking at cutting some cost, and one of the things that they were looking at was Monticello, and we basically told them, look, you can take this other piece of software, or you can take the printer in the other room, but you can't take that piece of software. It's essential to our business.
That's terrific. And so you are full service compliant, correct?
That's correct.
What was the process like going through to get certified?
Well, at first we were trying to do it alone, and going through the TEM environment when it first came out was very time consuming and very difficult. However, the tech team at Monticello they had a book. I can't remember what the title of it was, but they had this little pamphlet that had everything you needed to know to be able to get through it and to become full service compliant, so that you could upload your scenarios. If there was a problem with, if it gave you an error, it told you where to find the error, how to fix the error, so that you could pass your scenarios and get through. So the process itself was difficult, but with the Monticello side and having them on our team, it made it much easier.
And why is it important to become full service compliant?
Well, I think it's, first of all, it's going to be required. It's something that you're going to have to do eventually, so you might as well do it. It's important too, though, because you can claim a little bit extra discount for your customer. It's not a huge discount, but it's something, and it gives more visibility of the mail. And then I had also heard that back in, I think it's September or October of 2015, if you're not meeting at least 75% full service, you could lose your detached mail unit that you have on site. So it's an important thing to actually go and to get your full service compliance in place.
Yeah, I'd actually heard that that's this year, the 2014 requirement.
This year.
Anybody that has a detached mail unit should look into that. Yeah, and
that's good to know.
So what tips do you have for other folks that might be thinking about using post-presort software?
Well, like I said, we demoed a lot of other software out there, and they have their good sides. For the most part, we always came back to Monticello, and sometimes the other pieces of software were cheaper, but Monticello was still, in the long run, we were going to make money with Monticello because of not having to, because it was user-friendly, because it was something that you could do everything in one pass. And so we really found that Monticello was the best way to go. And so my tip is test some different pieces of software and see what you think. I think you'll find that you'll come back to Monticello because it really is a good piece of software.
Well, thank you. Do you have any other recommendations for people out there that might be considering post-presort software, but they haven't made a decision yet?
Well, Monticello will make it easy to, using the MailDB and the EntryDB will make it easy for you to be able to take a job and say, okay, I want to check each one of these jobs and see if they're going to save any money. And so Monticello really makes it easy to be able to do that, and you're going to save a lot of time. So that would be my biggest suggestion and recommendation is give it a shot, try it out, and see what you can do with it.
I'm going to get into a little bit more specifics, down in the weeds a little bit with more specific questions. Can you describe how the pre-validation in the post-presort software helps with Postal One?
Absolutely. Well, with the pre-validation, the software will actually go through and look to see if you have the required fields that you need to be able to upload into Postal One. Instead of having to go through all of the vague error messages that you might get trying to upload without having a pre-validation, it makes it so that you can, okay, well, I'm missing the permit number, or the permit number's in the wrong place, or the nonprofit number's missing. It'll show you that information that's missing so that you know before you try and upload it into the system and have to try and work through some of the errors that are on the postal side of things.
And how big are the jobs that you normally process?
Well, we run everything that we have through Monticello. So we process, we do backfills of 10 books for a periodical up to our largest mailing is 750,000. So we put everything through there because it's just that much easier to keep track of. First of all, the reason, some may say, well, why would you run 10 through there when you can just print the postal documentation? But the reason we run it through is we can actually use stuff like the pre-validate to check things, but then we can also use Postage DB to double check and make sure that we don't have errors happening or occurring on Postal One. So we run everything through there just as a safety precaution. And in doing that, it's made it so that we're running currently around 98% full service.
Fantastic. And how many jobs per week, let's say, on average, do you process?
On average per week, we do between 40 to 50 jobs per week, and that's between 4 pre-sorters.
And that's for around how many customers?
We have 450 customers currently mailing with us.
Okay. Do you still produce paper postage statements?
No, we do not. Well, no, we don't. We produce them when Postal One is giving us errors, but in the long run, we don't do anything post through paper because everything's going full service. And if we do stuff with paper documentation, then we lose the full service discount, and it affects our scorecard. And so we don't do anything that way. But like I said, we do use the Postage DB side of it to double check and make sure that we're not seeing some errors like in the periodical side. There's been some issues lately. And so we use the Postage DB to double check and make sure that we are uploading and taking the correct amount of money for the postage.
Can you tell the folks on the call today a little bit about what partial releases are and how you use post-presort software to manage partial releases?
Sure. Well, for us, a partial release may mean that the machine broke down or that a customer only wanted to mail a certain amount of the mailing. And so what we will do is we'll go in and we can pre-validate those, say there's 20 pallets, we can pre-validate the first 10 pallets and upload a partial postal statement to Postal One so that we can load it then, and then they can come back and load it again later. Also, say you've got a machine breakdown or something like that, and there's, or there's a book shortage, you can use it to take out some of the books and not mail those, and then that way you're not charged postage and the mailer ID isn't used, or the serial number.
And also, do you make any kind of corrections to any of the data elements in your mail.dat files?
Oh yes, every day we correct. So when we pre-sort jobs 2 weeks in advance. So we're not actually pre-sorting a job with the actual book in hand. We have an estimating tool in place that we base our estimated weight and thickness on. So we go back in when it's time to mail, and we will put in the estimated or the finalized weight advertising. We also will use it to check or put in CRIDs, MIDs, permit numbers for supplied mail.dats, different things like that. So we use MailDB all the time to correct stuff. Without it, it would be so time-consuming and so difficult to do.
What about mailing dates?
Oh yeah, mailing dates are definitely never right on the money. So we have to adjust those. We adjust weights, advertising percentages, all kinds of stuff in there.
And how do you handle spoilage?
Well, the spoilage is great because what happens, you know, in MailDB, there's a section where you can actually say you ran 200 books short. Well, you can go in and say, okay, well, we're going to end at this amount, and we can actually pull the spoilage and only mail and charge for the number of books that did actually mail. MailDB allows us to go in and pull up the records, and then the barcodes and the postage aren't charged. The barcodes aren't used, and the postage is not charged. So it makes it much easier makes it so you don't have to go back and resort anything.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Jason. Rob, I'm going to turn it back over to you for the next part of the agenda.
Perfect. Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Jason. I have to say that was incredibly informative. You actually managed to cover every single question that had been submitted up to that point. So, folks, if you've got additional questions for Jason, for Joe, or for Jean as she does her presentation, please enter them into the question box on the right-hand side of the screen. We'll go ahead and collate those, and then I'll have a dedicated question and answer section here right after Jean's done. And well, actually, it's time for Jean. She's got a demonstration for us. How are you today, Jean?
Just fine, Rob. How are you?
Excellent. Welcome.
Thank you. So now everybody should be able to see my screen. I have EntryDB up. We've talked a lot about MailDB over various webinars that we've had, so we thought that it'd be a good opportunity, especially after Jason was talking about the flexibility that they have because they're determining their entry points on their own versus having a logistics company do it for them so that they can get their mail prepared. They know where it's going in advance instead of last minute type thing. EntryDB is just a great tool for being able to analyze whether or not it's cost effective to go to a destination. Like Jason was saying, you don't have freight costs within your pre-sort to know whether or not something is cost effective. You know, if you've been in the mailing world for a long time, you probably got a general idea of, you know, when it hits a certain number of pieces or a certain weight that typically that's going to be something that's worth drop shipping. But there's other things that come into the equation. You use a different logistics company. You want to compare logistics companies. The fuel surcharge goes through the roof. And so what would have typically gone out would have been cost effective to drop ship and there was savings. All of a sudden when you get up to a 40–46% fuel surcharge, that stuff gets knocked out of the equation. So our software allows you to do that type of analysis. So Jason was kind enough to give us a scenario that we could compare what you would see in a file with shipping costs included. And I'm also going to show you what it would look like without shipping costs. We have several different ways that we can handle how you assign strategies that you assign entry points. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritties of that, but it's something that when you go through training, we'll definitely cover why one strategy is better than another. depending on whether you're looking for timeliness or whether you're looking for the cheapest way to go. The cost defaults allow you to build in things like if you know for sure that if you're under a certain minimum weight or you don't have more than a certain amount of savings, we can actually let you build different cost defaults to allow you to knock out those points that don't hit that minimum. But typically what most people are doing instead of building cost defaults is they have entry lists, and an entry list actually has all the postal facilities. And what I'll do is I'll actually show you an entry list as we go along. But basically what you can do is come in, and if you don't have a logistics company providing you with an EntryDB entry list, you can build your own. You just put in your zip code, click on New, and select the facilities that you want to be part of the entry list. And once the hubs are on board, we'll be able to support those as well. Those are the new ones that are the cross-dock facilities that'll be popping up. Joe, I know that you're supposed to be on mute right now, but do you know when the hubs are coming into play?
It hasn't been finalized yet, Gina, but it's looking
Okay.
like about the early part of 2015 probably.
Okay. We also support FSS, which that's something that if you're doing flats, it's going to come into play. And if you have mail that is FSS prepared, then you have the ability to take it to the FSS or not. And that's one of the beauty too of maybe you sort it and it's FSS and you realize with freight costs that it doesn't make sense to take it to the FSS facility. What I'm going to do is I'm going to load up a scenario without freight costs, and you can see what the results look like. And just so that you know, we do have the ability to put in, again, the fuel surcharge. We can put in an admin fee. So if you want to say to your customer that for our cost of handling your jobs to actually drop ship, that maybe per shipment you charge them $25, $50, $100, whatever it happens to be. If you do commingling and you know that when it gets over a certain cost, it's not going to be cost effective for you to drop ship. It makes more sense to give it to the commingler. Then you can actually put that cost in, and we'll make that mail fall back to origin, and then you can send it off to the commingler. We also support e-induction. If you sign up for e-induction through Postal One Help Desk, then we can populate for the SB sites. If it's an SB-capable site, go ahead and set it to e-induction. If you're making all your appointments and want to do it not only on the facilities that have scans, but the facilities that don't, but you have an appointment number, we can do that as well. So here I'll load a template with no freight, and actually I already did that. Oops. I'll click OK here and assign entry points to this job. You can do it on the current rate case. When there's a future rate case, we typically have that out in advance so that you have an opportunity to see how those new rates are going to impact you. You can do a portion of the job, and here I'll just do the entire job. We will let you know if you're going to an NDC or ADC if it's a periodical job, if that facility is the exact same address as the SCF. And also in the situation of flats, if the ASF NDC or the SCF and the DDU all match up, we can also get you that DDU discount as well. So that's the nice thing is that the mail direction file specifically even has the dock door. So if the dock door for the NDC is on one side of the building and the SCF is on the other side of the building, we know you can't take the discount. But if they're going through the same dock door, why not take that extra I think it's 1.1 or 1.3 that you can get by saying yes to SCF discount. The reason we give you the option is because sometimes people find that it's just they don't want to deal with the clerk questioning the SCF being on an NDC entry, for example. But you are entitled to do this. So what we do up on the top is just let you know what the job is, what the weight is, what scenario you're using, whether you have a freight cost multiplier, and again, typically that's fuel surcharge, whether you put in an admin fee, and what strategy you're using. And if you don't like to drop ship any loose mail, and actually if you're full service, you're not going to be drop shipping any loose mail typically. There are exceptions to every rule. Then you can select not to drop ship anything that's loose. And then we'll let you know what rate case it is and what the postage is if it's all origin mail. And in this case, the file is marked right now as just being origin. And then entry DB, since it doesn't have it in this current situation, it's not looking at shipping cost. So it's determining, is there any savings to a destination? If it has savings to that destination, go to that destination. And one of the things I wanted to point out is notice on the NDC that there's actually copies that are getting the SCF discount, and that's what I was talking about with that co-location discount. So there's a potential of almost $9,000 in savings. Now, what we're going to do next is actually look at it in terms of shipping costs. But before I do that, you can actually drill in one of the destinations, and you can sort by any one of the columns so you can see what your savings is. So if you didn't have freight costs, it doesn't mean you wouldn't be able to use entry DB. You still have the savings that you can see and look at that and see, well, is it realistic? Can I ship Phoenix for less than $53? Now I'm going to cancel out of here and go back out and load another scenario with freight costs. So once again, it gives you the origin, it tells you how the file is currently marked, and if you're running it through a pre-sort and you've already marked entry points, then you can actually see a comparison. How did you do when you were marking the points within your pre-sort compared to once you factor in your shipping costs? So you can get an idea of how close are you on the mark in terms of picking your entry points. And then down below, now that shipping comes into the equation, there's almost $4,000 in shipping. And so now a few of the entry points drop out because it's no longer cost effective to go to those destinations. So our software is looking at those costs, and in this particular scenario, the fuel surcharge is 1.48. And as that changes up or down, that could, again, have an impact on whether or not you go to a destination. Rob, back to you.
Thank you, Gene. Appreciate it. So, Joe, we do have one question for you. Otherwise, between you and Gene and Jason, you covered most of our questions, but I'll direct this first one at you. If you have additional questions, please put them into the question box on the right-hand side of the screen. Joe, this one says, I am a very small volume mailer. I still struggle with something like this being cost-effective. Perhaps you can speak to the pricing of Monticello and how effective it is for volume mailers.
Well, the good thing about our offering, which is different than our competition, is that we have the software in modules, so you can buy only sort of the functionality that you really need. So, for example, the entry DB module is a separate module, and if you don't need to do entry optimization, then you don't have to purchase that. So the core product is called MailDB, And that's the product that really you would need to be able to just import the files, be able to update things like piece weight, mailing date, crids and mids, anything, any field in the file that you need to be able to update, and to be able to pre-validate the files for Postal One, and to be able to submit all of the transaction types that are allowed in Postal One. So that's really our core module, and it's really cost-effective. I'm not going to quote pricing on the interview today, but if you get in touch with us, we can give you the pricing for just that module, and I think you'll find that it's surprisingly reasonable. The other modules are, we have Postage DB, which you may want to have. What it allows you to do is to create postage statements and other production-type reports that are can be handy. For example, if you're in Postal One and the Postal One system locally or nationally goes down, you can go ahead and produce a paper postage statement, and then later on, when Postal One comes back up, you can submit the file later. That might be handy, in particular if you're doing partial releases. And then the other product that we talked a lot about today is Entry DB. There's another module called Pallet DB. Most folks make pallets in the pre-sort process, and that's probably the best way to do it for normal operations. But what a lot of folks want to do is, either because they're a first-class mailer and they have a customer-supplier agreement that requires that they make very unique types of separations for their pallets, that's a good use of our Pallet DB product. But also, you can do co-palletization, and you can do that in-house. So you can take trays or bundles of mail from multiple jobs, pre-sorted jobs, and you can combine them onto pallets. So it makes it easier to store the mailing before it gets shipped. It makes it less expensive to ship and handle. And also, if it's periodical, standard mail, or bound printed matter, by having those co-palletized pallets, you can get more density and you can get more dropship discounts. So that's the reason that we make the product modularized. So I would suggest that you get in touch with us, and we can give you a price quote.
That's great, Joe. You make it sound like the product's going to pay for itself over time. Is that true?
It has to. In this business, folks either can cost justify the software based on what they see in a live demo with live data, their live data. My experience, and I've been doing this with these specific products for almost 20 years, and this is a tough industry. Everything has to be cost justified. So if we can't cost justify it for you, then you're obviously not going to buy it. I think Jason pointed out that even our existing customers, they have to cost justify keeping the software each year, because if they're going to keep it, they're going to want to have the ongoing maintenance. So they're going to want to pay the maintenance renewal fee. So their financial management is coming to them every year and saying, why do you need the software? Tell me how we can cost justify this. So yeah, it has to pay for itself.
And Joe, if I could just add, at Lane Press, when we brought Monticello in-house, we actually monitored and kept track of how much freight we were moving over the first year, and then how much we made just by, I'm not even talking about markup, how much we made as far as time savings goes and paying people in-house. And the software paid for itself in less than 12 months. So it really does pay for itself in the long run.
Terrific. So for the folks on the call, if you're interested in finding out a little bit more about it, like I said, you can send us real mail.dad jobs that you actually process, and we can go through all of these steps and all these processes. And you can ask us specific questions, and we'll show you exactly how to do it, and you'll be able to see exactly how long each step takes, and you'll be able to understand very quickly whether or not there's a benefit that you think you can cost justify.
Perfect. As you can see on your screen, on October 29th at 9 a.m. Pacific Time, we will be presenting another webinar. This one is called Beware, Invoices Are Right Around the Corner. It's a rather scary topic, just in time for Halloween. I feel like I should have spooky music behind me as I announce that one. Thank you. On behalf of everyone at Satori Software, I would like to thank our speakers for presenting today. Thank you, Joe Bailey. Thank you, Gene Rainier. Appreciate you being here as always. Thank you to our guest speaker, Jason Kiefer from the Lane Press. We are glad that you could join us today. Thanks, guys. Thank you to our customers and potential customers for joining us today. Please take a moment to complete the brief survey you're going to be offered at the end of this presentation so that we can continue to improve our webinar series. As I mentioned, this webinar will be available in its entirety in the webinar section of satorisoftware.com. This webinar has been produced by Jerisa Chang. For Satori Software, I'm Rob Perrin, the Director of Merchandising. Once again, thank you for attending the webinar, and we at Satori would like to wish you smooth mailing ahead.